Alright, what's going on, guys? This is Manelki, and welcome back to another Crusader Kings 2 video. I did one of these a little while ago. It was called Tips and Tricks, and it seemed to be pretty well received. People seem to like it. We got some good feedback there. And there was a little bit of sort of requests and desire for me to do another one going a little bit deeper. And I have been thinking about that lately, especially with the release of the Jade Dragon expansion. I'm wanting to do another one, sort of cover a few more topics, go a little bit deeper into it, and just kind of fill in the holes from the other videos. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do here today. So the first thing I'd like to talk about here is the topic of expansion. Now, we kind of alluded to that in our last video, talking about wars and claims and how to get title claims, that kind of thing. But I wanted to sort of go into actual expansion techniques and show you a couple of slightly more advanced ones that you might find useful. So, first thing we should talk about before we actually dive right into the expansion is it's kind of tied into the sort of succession laws of the game. This is sort of relevant here. So, if you go up to the top of your screen here, you're going to see a little hammer button for laws. Just click that. And the first window you're going to be at is your inheritance laws. So this is how titles are passed down through your realm to other people. So you see here we have two sort of categories in our succession law. We have agnatic and absolute cognatic. So under agnatic, basically what that means is only males can inherit. So even if you have lots of daughters, they're not going to get your land. It's only going to go to the boys. Absolute cognatic, of course, is a little more progressive, and women can inherit on the same grounds that men do. Now, you'll notice under all of these different laws, there's these little question marks. Now, these are conditions that you must satisfy before you can pass these laws. So, as an example, right now we're agnatic cognatic, which means the oldest child of the ruler inherits all titles. Your successor will like it, blah, blah, blah. Women can only inherit, but only if there's no, eligible males. So if there's a boy, she won't get it. If there's no boys, then she'll get it. So you can change to one of these, but you need to satisfy some conditions. So as you see here, there's a bunch of little things listed, and all of them are green except for two. Two of the ones are not satisfied. So you'll see the first one says, has reigned for at least 10 years. So we just started this game. This ruler's brand new. So he hasn't ruled for 10 years, so until he does, we can't change the law. And that's common for all laws. You have to wait 10 years between law changes, basically. Now, the next one, you'll see down the line, there's no count or higher tier vassal of this title has a negative opinion of you. So if you look here in our vassals, we have a malcontent vassal here in Malsnekten. Yeah, so he doesn't like us, as you can see. His opinion is -9. This down here, he hates us, -14. So any of our vassals of this rank, of count rank or higher, will screw up that little condition. We're going to come back to that a little bit shortly. So basically, these are the sort of gender laws. And over here we have the actual succession law, how it's broken down. So right now, we are the ruler of Scotland. We are the King of Scotland. And in Scotland, our succession law is agnatic cognatic, which means, women can inherit if there's no men. Primogenitor. The oldest child of the ruler inherits all titles. So that's a good way to start. Now, you'll notice here we started in the September start date of 1066. That's the sort of the base, like if you bought vanilla CK2 and had no DLC whatsoever, this is the earliest start date you're going to get. There's a couple of start dates before this, but you need DLC to unlock them. So this is the sort of vanilla start date of the game. And you'll notice that we're on Primogenitor. Now, normally when you start a game and in the earlier start dates, and a lot of people do like to play the earlier start dates just because you get a longer game, and that's generally more desirable. Well, I mean, depending on what you want to do, but personally, I like to start on the earlier start dates. Just get a nice long game. That's what I like personally. But normally when you do that, 9 times out of 10, they're going to start you on Gavelkind. So Gavelkind is a succession law, but basically means your titles are split amongst all of your children. So basically, let's see here, we have 3 sons, this guy, okay? So if we were on Gavelkind, all of our titles would be split amongst these 3 kids. Now, right now, we are the King of Scotland. So you see here, these are our titles. We have the Kingdom of Scotland. We also personally hold the County of Gowrie. Now, what this would mean was, because we have 3 kids, if we had more than one of our top title, they would be split within the kids. But as it is right now, we only have 1 kingdom. So that kingdom is going to go to our heir, and that kingdom includes the county of Gowrie. So in this case, it wouldn't really matter anyway, because we only have one of our top titles. We don't have another kingdom. If we also owned, say, just for example, the Kingdom of Ireland, so let's say we were a double king, Kingdom of Scotland and Kingdom of Ireland, and we hadn't formed the empire yet, we would be a double king. And what would happen at that point is our heir would get probably Scotland, and then one of these other kids would get Ireland. And that would actually shatter the realm. So we'd have two separate kingdoms, and they wouldn't be our vassals anymore. So that's kind of a caveat to the Gavelkind succession law. I mean, yes, it's still under your dynasty, which is, you know, handy for other reasons we might get into later. But ultimately, you want to make sure under succession that if you're using Gavelkind, you only have one of your top title. Now that's less of an issue for us because, as you see here, we're not using Gavelkind. We are actually using primogeniture, so the oldest child will inherit everything. So if we were a double king, our oldest kid would get both kingdoms, and it's not an issue. So that's Gavelkind. Generally, people tend to stay away from Gavelkind or try and get off it as soon as possible. There's benefits to Gavelkind. You get a bigger domain, which means here you can hold more things, more castles personally without penalty. You can also, there's a penalty for not having landed, for having sons that are not landed with some of the other succession laws, which you do not get that penalty with Gavelkind. But in my personal opinion, I tend to have more fun with the game. It seems to flow a little better if you can just get off of Gavelkind, because it can be frustrating when you take a bunch of titles and you just don't quite manage to pass that law before you die, and then suddenly you die and the realm shatters. It's a frustrating experience. So my advice to you is one of your first kind of priorities, unless you have a specific reason for wanting to mess around with Gavelkind, one of your first priorities should be try and get off that as soon as possible. So then we have elective Gavelkind. The titles of the ruler are divided amongst his children and the primary heir, who is elected from among the members of the ruling dynasty. So it's like Gavelkind, but you elect the heir. Seniorities, the oldest member of the dynasty inherits all titles. Now you'll look here, it's not the oldest kid, it's the oldest member of the dynasty. Personally, I really like this succession law. It's a little bit bizarre and you kind of end up all over the place. So what can end up happening in this case is, because the game is about dynasty and not country, which you could do, for example, let's say we're the king of Scotland, which we are, we could marry some chick in France, like marry our son or something, right? To some girl in France who maybe has some claims. And, you know, over the years they'll have kids and such, and maybe one of those kids eventually ends up coming to own this duchy, right? The Duchy of Anjou or whatever, right? So he's part of our dynasty. He owns this duchy in France. As he gets older and gets older and gets older, he will eventually be the oldest member of the dynasty. And then when we die, our titles pass to him because he's the heir, but he also owns this duchy down here, which means we've actually just expanded the kingdom just through virtue of succession law and having kids. So it's a very, very fun way to play. Literally, you can kind of play it that way. You can set up a breed style where you literally go on seniority succession and you breed the living hell out of everybody. You just marry, kids everywhere. Now you want to do it strategically, of course. Of course, we'll get into that in a bit. But you can end up with a lot of territory. Now the downside, of course, is that it's kind of all over the place. Like, you know, it's hard to sort of, I mean, you do have the succession thing to see who your heir is, but it can be a bit tricky to constantly be back and forth and bouncing back and forth between rulers who are kind of all over the place. But it's a great way to keep the empire together. So I actually really enjoy this succession law. Plus, it's a little bit kind of wild and unpredictable. It's kind of fun. Elective monarchy. The ruler and each lower rank vassal can nominate a successor. So you can kind of point at who you want your heir to be, and then of course they'll go for in a little election, and they'll see who your vassals think should be. Tanistry. The ruler and all vassals at 1 or 2 ranks below can nominate an heir, the tanist, from among members of the ruling dynasty. So again, it's a form of sort of nomination succession. Ultimogenitor is the youngest child. Youngest child of the ruler inherits. That can be handy because that will mean less successions overall, because your ruler is younger and will therefore rule longer. And that's what you want, because there's a thing called short reign penalty. So when you have a succession and your king dies, everybody's going to have a slight opinion penalty of you simply because you're new. They like people who have sat in the throne for a long time, which is bizarre if you think about it. In a way, it makes sense, but you know, there's a lot of situations in history where it's like, man, he's ruled for too long. But in Crusader Kings, it's the opposite. Like, the longer you rule, the better off you are. So if you start with a young ruler, there's going to be just less successions in general, and you're going to have an easier time with that. Now, the downside, of course, is succession is a very, very sensitive time for a kingdom. What can end up happening is people can take advantage of a young ruler. So you're going to end up in a regency. So any child, I think it's under the age of 14, or is it 16? Yeah, it's 16. Sorry, once they become an age of like a young adult. So once they turn 16, they're fine. But when before 16, sorry, they're in what's called a regency. So some adult is going to sort of step in and sort of manage the realm for them, and that opens up a kingdom to a lot of issues. Certain claims can only be pressed against a regency or a woman. So if your kingdom is in a regency, you're open for more attack. People have a funny habit of sticking daggers in the backs of children in this game, so it's just a very vulnerable time. But it's kind of a trade-off for the potential of a long rulership. So that's kind of the basic rundown of the different election laws, or succession laws rather. So just kind of go through here and just kind of figure out how you're trying to play. What do you think might suit the way you're playing the most, or the way you're role playing the most, or whatever you think might be suitable. So yeah, that's that. So now that we've talked a little bit about succession law, we can talk about how to use that to your advantage. What can you do with that? Well, let's say, for example, we wanted to take some territory down here in England. So let's have a look at this duchy here, the Duchy of Mercia. So if we right click on the duchy and we click on the little shield, you'll see this is the current de facto Duchy of Mercia. And this is the ruler, this is the Duke of Mercia, he owns it, Edwin of Huis, okay? There's a certain line of succession with each title, so it's not just your current title. Every title in the game has its own line of succession. Every single title will pass to somebody else, and so on and so on. Now, before this most recent patch, the Jade Dragon patch, now somebody up there correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it was just recently put in with this new Jade Dragon patch. Before, basically what it was, is if you wanted to see the line of succession of a title, you'd have to click on that title, hover over the shield up here, and then you would get this list, okay? So you see line of succession, Morcar, Meridud, Edwall, whatever. Now, if you wanted to interact with these people and try and marry into this line, you would literally have to, okay, look at their name, and then you have to open up the character finder and like try and find them, and like half the time you wouldn't be able to find them in the list, or they wouldn't show up. It was unstreamlined. It was frustrating, and it just didn't work that great. I didn't find it terribly helpful or useful. But as of this last patch, they've added this box here, line of succession, and you actually have little portraits of everybody that is the line of succession here, so you can just interact with it. That is so good. That is so easy and so helpful. I really love this. This is great. So basically, this is the Duke here, and this is the guy who's first in line of succession, i.e. the heir. So Duke Morcar will inherit this duchy when this guy dies. Now, if he was killed off, then the heir would default to this kid, and if this kid was killed or whatever, it would default to this kid, and so on. So let's say we wanted to marry into this line. So we check, who do we have that could marry one of those people? Well, we have 3 boys. Let's have a look here. There is a 30-year-old woman and an 11-year-old girl. So probably going to have to go for this girl. Now you should also note that the higher you go in the line of succession, the less likely you are to be able to marry into it. So most of the time, you're going to be, like, this chick's only like, what, 5th in line? Most of the time, you're going to be aiming for 6th in line. Now, don't get me wrong. Go as high as you can. Always go as high as you can in the line of succession, of course. It's just less frustrating, just less work later. But basically, it's looking in this case like, probably this chick here. So let's go ahead and arrange a betrothal. So this brings up the betrothal menu here, little box or whatever. Here's the guy who is the liege of who we're trying to marry. So he is of her court. So we can say, okay, let's marry her to Duncan here. Now, right now he's going to say no, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons why. In this case, it's mostly political concerns, whatever. Now, quite often they will say yes, though. So basically, once they say yes, you click accept, and then they'll get betrothed. Now, one very important thing to remember, right now we're sending off a boy to marry, and then what happens is when people have kids, the child of that union is of the man's dynasty, not the woman's. And the exception to that is in a matrilineal marriage or a matrilineal betrothal. And what that means, of course, is it's the woman's dynasty that carries on rather than the man's. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to get people to agree to a matrilineal marriage. But in some cases, it does happen, it does work. So if there was only boys here and you had some daughters, give it a try. See if they'll marry them matrilineally, which would mean it would be of your dynasty rather than theirs, and basically you're butting in line. you're sticking your family into their line of succession, which is what you want to do. That's the whole point. Just as a kind of explanation of how this would work. So, I mean, he's not going to do it now because he's going to say no. Yeah, he's not going to marry our kids because of political concerns. But let's say they did marry. So they're gonna get married, and then once they both come of age, because he's like 4 and she's 11. So once they both hit 16, they're gonna start having kids. And once they have kids, that kid will be the heir of whoever, it'll be their heir, right? So what's going to happen is, let's say your son is married to this girl, and she's whatever, 5th in line or whatever. At that point, what you do is you start murdering these people. So you see here, plot to kill. Now, we went into intrigue and murder in our last video, but just quick refresher, right-click, plot to kill. And there's your plot chance. That's the likelihood it's going to happen, and you can increase it with inviting more people and so on. Again, we went into that before. So basically what you want to do, marry into these line, and then murder your way up the line until you put this girl here. Once she's the heir, that means this guy dies, she gets the title. And that's what you want. And so, of course, well, once you're in that spot, you murder this guy. And then what happens is she will be the Duchess of Mercia. Once she's the Duchess of Mercia, the kid that her and Donald or Duncan or whatever had would be the heir to the duchy. And he is of your dynasty. She's not of your dynasty. She is still House Cecil or whatever. But her child will be of House, whatever we are here, Dunkeld, right? And that's what you want. So at that point, maybe let the little boy there reach of age, like their kid, let him come of age, and then maybe, maybe Nest here has a little accident, and at that point, you have a child of your dynasty as the Duke of this title. So why is that good? Because if it's just, some kid in your dynasty owns territory somewhere, big deal, right? Why does that matter? Well, there's 2 reasons that matters. One, you can get an alliance with them. It's very easy. It's easier to get an alliance with somebody of your dynasty. And second, remember we talked about the succession law over here, and the one I like to use, seniority? The oldest member of the dynasty inherits all titles. So eventually, because you've put this title into your family, and if you can keep it in there through not doing what the AI just let us do, if you can keep it in your family, eventually the ruler of this title will probably end up being at some point the oldest member of your dynasty. And that would mean the ruler of this title is your heir. So when you die, all this land passes to this person here, who is, of course, of your dynasty. And so the net effect of that is essentially Scotland grows. So then you have Scotland up here, and then bloop, a little blue chunk down here. So you've effectively expanded the kingdom simply by marrying into lines of succession. And it's a really fun way to do it, a really fun way to play, fun way to go about it. And there's no limit to how much you can do that. You can marry, have lots of kids, marry your boys off to princesses and as high in the line of succession as you can, marry your daughters off and your sisters off, matrilineally as much as you can into titles. Now, like I said before, the higher in the line of succession, the harder it's going to be to marry. So, good luck marrying these people. It could happen. It's possible, but it's less likely. So you're usually aiming for this spot. But basically, you can marry lots of kids, and over time, and this game gives you a lot of time. And again, remember what we talked about? I personally started the earlier start dates. That's 700 something, and the game ends in 1440 something. So you've got about 700 years to work with. So that's kind of one way to do it. One way to expand is through marrying into lines of succession. Now, there's another method of expansion that you might call expanding through politics, I guess. And it's considered by many to be one of the fastest ways to expand your kingdom. Now, there's a small caveat here. You have to at least be a duke for this to work. This will not work if you are a count. The technique revolves around inviting foreign heirs to your court and granting them land. That way, when they receive their inheritance, it basically falls into your kingdom because they're already your vassal at this point. So to better demonstrate this, I've loaded back into the game as the King of France here, and we're going to show this off. So basically what you can do is you can look at a territory and say, okay, let's say you want this one. And you kind of click on the portrait here, and you see the heir. In this case, it's not going to work because it's a kid. You can't invite a kid to court. But let's have a look around here. Oh, that's no good. No good. Okay. So in this case here, the county of Bar. Okay, so this is the heir, and you'll notice here he's not landed. This technique only works if they're not landed. They're not going to join your court if they have land somewhere else. They need to be an unlanded adult heir, like this guy here. So Theory Scarponus. So we can go ahead and say invite to court. Now in this case, he's going to say no because he has no reason to move, base reluctance. Now if he had a really, really high opinion of me, and you know, maybe not so much a great opinion of his liege or so on, he might be inclined to move. In this case, he won't do it. But what you can do is you can go to the character screen here, define character screen, which is the period button, I guess. And what you can do is you can search for people, all of these filters here, and you can say join court yes. So this is a list of all the people in the game who would be willing to accept an invitation to court. And so you can kind of go through here and see, okay, who has claims. This guy here, for example, he has a claim to Tir Orogain. And if you hover over his portrait here, you see he's also the heir to the county of Ergaila. So yeah, he's the heir to Ergaila. So the county of Ergaila, where's that? Okay, that's up here in Ireland. So just for the sake of demonstration, let's go ahead and do this. So this guy, as you see, he is the heir, Aed MacNeil, to this county of Argyll. So let's go ahead and invite him to court. And he'll say yes. King Philippe has the power to press my claim, so that's why he's willing to do it. So we'll go ahead and invite him to court. Wait a little bit. A couple days, he should show up. There he is. Aed MacNeil has arrived at your court. So what we need to do now is grant him land. We only have 2 actual counties to our name, personally. We have Orléans and we have Paris. So we're going to go ahead and give him Orléans because Paris is our capital. We're not giving him our capital. So go ahead and land him. So now you see he's a count. He is the Count of Orleans, or Orléans, whatever. Which means, and he's also the heir to the county of Argyll. Which means when the current duke, or count rather, of Argyll, this guy, when he dies, his title is going to pass to this guy. And since this guy's your vassal and already a duke or whatever, or a count or whatever, he's going to inherit this land. And since he's your vassal, it's your land. So, I mean, hypothetically, if this guy was to have a wee accident, in this case, we don't have any valid plot power against him. We can't do it. So we've got to wait for this guy to die through natural causes, or, you know, manipulate our position in such a way so we are able to kill this guy. So that's basically the strategy you can use. And once you hit the king level, and you have a bunch of duchies under your control, you can do the same thing with duchies, and that's a hugely quick way to expand. You just basically invite a foreign ducal heir to your court, give him a duchy in your land, and then you will eventually inherit his duchy in the foreign area. So that's a pretty fast way to expand your kingdom. Very easy, very simple. It's very passive. There's no war required. It's a great way to expand. Now, while on the same topic, there's kind of another technique you can use, which is kind of related. You can actually press people's claims. So if you recall, when we go into the character finder, and remember we were looking through here for people that said heir, like this guy we did invite, Count Aed of Orléans. He's the heir to the county of Argyll. Well, if you look over here, you see this little crown. That also means he has claims on something. He has some kind of claim to some land somewhere. And he's already in our court, so if we have a look at him, we can see that he has a claim to Tir Orogain. So you see here, titles right now, this is what he owns. County of Orleans, or Orléans, that's what we gave him if you recall. Claims, this is what he has a claim to because of his birthright. So, strong claim on the county of Tir Orogain. Now, where's Tir Orogain? Oh, here it is. It's right here. So, right now, he stands to inherit this land here, but he has a rightful claim to this. And so what we could do is we could actually press that claim for him. And then, because again, he's already landed, he would get the title and it would become under our kingdom because he's our vassal. Now, there's a very important thing you got to remember when you do this. You want to make sure that if you're going to press somebody's claim, they're already A, your vassal, or B, they're a close dynasty member. Because if neither of those 2 conditions are satisfied, if you press somebody's claim, they're going to go independent. They're going to be like, hey, thanks for pressing my claim, but they're going to get it on their own. They're not going to be part of your kingdom. They're just going to go completely independent, And as much as they'll love you for it, you'll get nothing out of it. So you want to make sure they're landed. And the other thing you want to make sure of is you want to make sure that whatever title they end up getting as a result of the war or the deal or whatever is not in excess of A, your title, obviously, or they'll go independent, or B, in excess of their current title. So if they get promoted as a result of this deal, they will go independent. So as an example here, this guy here, he is, he has a claim on the county of whatever, of Tir Erogain. But let's say, for example, he had a claim on, I don't know, the Duchy of Mumu, and we press his claim, even though we're a king, and we press his ducal claim, because he gets promoted as a result of that war, he's going to go independent. So you have to kind of watch that. So once you have all that in place, you can basically just declare war, generally. So you can go to Tir Erogain and click on this guy, and you can see declare war is, of course, grayed out because it needs to be approved by the council. That's a whole other story for a whole other video. But basically, generally speaking, you can declare war to press people's claims, fight the battle, win the war, they get the stuff, which in turn means you get the stuff because they're your vassal. So one thing that's definitely worth mentioning if you're going to be using this technique, occasionally when you do it, you're going to get a warning at the top here that says Vassal Inheritance Warning. There are vassals with worrisome lines of succession. On death, their titles might pass from your realm. So what that means is, if we look here, you can see this is the guy we granted land to, and as you see here, his heir is the Earl of Argyala, which has nothing to do with us. So if this guy was to die, all his titles, like Orleans, for example, would pass to this guy, and we would lose this title from our kingdom. Because this guy has nothing to do with our dynasty, has nothing to do with our kingdom, he's not our vassal, so we would literally lose this title. And we don't want that to happen, so what we need to do is we need to change this guy's heir. So right now his heir is the Earl of whatever, his former liege, I suppose. And what we want to do is we want to change that. We want to put his heir as somebody of our dynasty. What we do, the way we do that is we force him to marry our sister or our daughter. So you want to make sure you have lots of sisters or daughters or close family members around. If it happens to be a lady you invite, we'll have some brothers or some sons or whatever, just kicking around. And what you can do is you can force this guy to marry your daughter. Now you want to do this before you land him, because if you land him first, there's a possibility of saying no. But if he's just in your court, he has no way of saying no. He has to do what you say, including being forced to matrilineally marry your sister. And the reason you want to matrilineally marry them is because if you have a regular marriage, he's the man, she's the woman, their kids are going to be of his dynasty. You don't want that. You want their kids to be of your dynasty, which means matrilineal marriage. So anybody with this little blood symbol, the blood means dynasty. The blood with the golden rim around it means close dynasty. So anybody of your dynasty with this blood symbol, marry to this dude, matrilineally or whatever, or if it's a woman, don't. But you want their kids to be of your dynasty. So these guys are going to have kids. When she goes up to be 16, they'll have a baby. That baby will become this guy's heir. Now, right now, this guy has, if I'm not mistaken, he does have an heir. He has a child. Domnall is not of our line. But, Domnall can die eventually. We can kill Domnall. So basically, in this situation, what you want to do is do this, make sure they have kids, and all the while, you're going to be plotting to kill this guy so he doesn't end up becoming the heir. So that's basically the technique you like to use. Make sure that if you're going to do this, make sure to marry them to somebody of your dynasty, force them to have kids, and then this title will always stay in your dynasty. So now that we've learned how to expand our kingdom, we need to look at how to keep all these new vassals happy. Realm stability is a pretty big deal in CK2, and if you don't manage it properly, your kingdom could just tear itself apart. So let's have a look at keeping those people happy. So first what you do, you just click on yourself, and then you can go to the Vassals tab right here. And then this is your list of all your direct vassals. Now, when I say direct vassal, I just mean the people that report directly to you, where there's, they're going to have their own vassals depending on their rank, but there'll be people under them, of course. But these are the guys and the ladies that report directly to you. So you can sort them by rank, name, tax, and you can also tax being tax income that they pay you, and you can also sort them by opinion. So if you go in this list, you can see here that all these people have green opinions of me, which means they like me. But down near the bottom here, you'll see these two characters here, they have red opinions. That means they don't like me very much at all. And so, in order to get the most benefit out of your vassals, you want to have a high opinion of you, because not only is that going to help keep your realm together in terms of stability, and they're less likely to join factions and become rebellious on you and such, less likely to murder you, but it also means that if they have an opinion over 0, so at least an opinion of 1, so somewhere in the green, they're going to start paying you taxes, first of all. So you can see this guy here, Malsnekton Mribe. He would be paying me 6.6 gold in taxes, but unfortunately, he doesn't like me, so he pays me nothing. And same thing with this guy here. So not only do you get taxes, but also in times of war, if they don't like you, they're not going to provide you with their full levy. So the more they like you, the more troops they're going to send in times of war, which is obviously pretty strong. So that's what you want to do. You want to make these people happy. So how do you go about doing that? Well, there's a number of ways you can do it. First of all, you want to right-click on their portrait, and here's all the different interactions you can take with this character. And as you can see, there's quite a few, but there's a lot of really simple ways to sort of make them happy. So, first of all, the very simplest thing to do is you can send them a gift. You basically bribe them with money. So, as you can see here, I could send him 49.7 gold, and he would like me. That would increase his opinion of me by 18. Now, just for reference, that's a really bad trade. Don't do that. That's a lot of money for not a lot of gain. Now, in this case, that would put him into the positive. But is it worth $50? That's situational. If you're in desperate need of that one last vassal to like you, for example, if you want to pass a particular law that requires all your vassals to like you, then okay. But generally, that's a bad deal. But that's one thing you can. More often than not, you'll get a better deal than that. Those numbers more or less will be reversed more often than not. But this guy must be greedy or something. But anyhow, so there's that. You can send them a gift of money. What you can do is you can also give them an honorary title. So these are just sort of little ceremonial positions within your court that don't really mean anything, but they make people feel good. Like, well, with the exception of court jester, this will make them hate you because it makes them a joke. So don't make them a jester unless you're just trying to make a fool out of them, which is fun. But these other titles like Keeper of the Swans, Master of the Horse, blah blah blah, Master of the High Honor, whatever, Cupbearer, Seneschal. These are just ceremonial positions which don't really do anything other than make people feel special, and it makes them have a tiny little opinion bonus. Now, as you see here in the tooltip, a monthly salary, they give you a tiny bit. It costs you a wee tiny bit of money. It's not really significant, and does give them a little bit of prestige. So that being said, it's an interesting thing you might consider to maybe give your heirs some honorary titles, because not only does it, build them up a tiny little bank, but it also gives them prestige, and you want your heirs to have prestige, so it's an interesting thing to do. It's good for keeping vassals happy. Another thing you can do is you can assign guardian. Now, this you have to be careful with, because it kind of has consequences, but if you let somebody look after one of your kids or something like that, they're gonna think it's an honor. Well, it is really, because you're a royalty, but it's they're gonna be all happy and stuff, and that's gonna increase their opinion of you. Now, you got to be careful doing that though, because depending on who you assign as a guardian, that kid you assign is gonna end up with some traits. So, for example, if we assigned this guy here, the guardianship of one of our kids, he would like us more for that for sure. But as you can see here, he has the cruel trait, so there's a chance that our kid might end up being cruel because of that. Now, of course, if we're going to make a general out of this kid, then that would be a great trait to have. But just something to bear in mind when you go to do that sort of thing. Another thing you can do is transfer vassalage. So what this means is basically you can say, okay, I'm going to take one of my direct vassals and put him directly under you. So basically you're giving this person somebody who works under them now. You're giving them more power is what you're doing basically. So for example here, this guy is a duke, as you can see by his border, right? The shiny border with the gems in it, that's the duke. So you can transfer one of your own dukes or barons, anybody under him, you can transfer them to him, which will give him direct control of these people, which will make him feel more powerful and be more powerful and make him happier. So let's do that just for the sake of argument here. So let's transfer Malmur under Malsnektan, and it'll make this guy happy. So what you can do is you click on him, you go transfer vassalage, and you pick who you want to transfer. And we're going to transfer, who do we say? Malmur. There he is, Malmur. Vassal, blah, 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 is increases opinion by 10. Now, this is going to have a double effect. Before we actually do that, let's have a look at this. So right now we have two malcontent vassals, right? And like I was talking about before, sometimes you need to have everybody liking you to pass a particular law. Or maybe you just want a really simple, stable realm. Like if you're governing like an empire, Sometimes, in the interests of realm stability, you might want to just consolidate your vassals and have, say, five or you know, 3 or 4 kings as vassals, since you're an emperor, rather than having like 50,000 dukes and counts and stuff and barons all over the place. Sometimes you just want to keep it simple. Now, granted, doing that will cost you a little bit of levy, depending on the different opinions of the different people in your realm, but the upside is that your realm is a lot more stable and a lot easier to manage. So that's another sort of consideration. So basically what you can do, like I was saying before, see how these 2 malcontent vassals, well, what if you do? If you transfer this guy under this guy, it's going to make this guy happier, and suddenly this guy will not be under you anymore. So now you have one, and instead of 2 very pissed off people, you have 1 slightly pissed off person. So it's one of those things. It's kind of a trade-off. So what you can do is you can say transfer vassalage, and then you do this, and then you click on the guy you want to give to him, which in this case is Malmor. You click him. Make Earl Malmor of Athol a vassal of Prince Malsnektan, increasing his opinion by 10. So boom, just like that. We'll refresh that window. So now you see here, Malsnektan only hates us by -7 now because we gave him that thing, and the other guy is gone from our list because he's no longer our direct vassal. He's this guy's vassal. He's his problem now, not ours. So that's another way you can do it. Another thing you can do is give him land, which is a pretty nice thing to do. It's basically giving him quite a bit more power. In this case, we can't do it because we have no land to give him, but if we did, we could hand land. As you can see here, we only have 1 actual direct title, the County of Gowrie, which we can't give him because that's our capital. We need land too. So that's one way to do it. You can give him land. That makes them like you a lot. That's one of the best ways to make someone like you. The downside, of course, is you're giving them a lot of power, which can kind of bite you in the ass down the road if you're not careful what you give to who. So that's something to consider. You can make the person a commander. In this case, again, he already is a commander, as you can see by the relieve commander option, which makes you fire him for the commander position. But you can make a military commander, a general basically, out of somebody, and that will make them like you a little bit more. Now, just for the sake of argument, you can see here, this is a list of all your commanders. If you go to your council tab, or your council button here, and then you click minor titles, these are all the little minor titles. And if you remember, we talked about all these meaningless titles here, Keeper of the Swans, and so on. This is where you find those. It's also where you find your designated regent, which is who will look after the kid, or who will look after your kingdom in the event of a regency, such as a kid ending up ruling, or let's say you're incapable or whatever. This is who's going to sort of step in and take over temporarily. So pick this person wisely. I'd recommend somebody with a high either diplomacy or maybe some stewardship, but probably diplomacy. Again, that's all personal choice. Your court physician is who's going to look after people who are sick. You want somebody with high learning here. And the rest of these are just kind of, opinion things. So as you can see, we have a free commander slot. You want to pick somebody with high martial. We have nobody with high martial here. These are all crap commanders, so I wouldn't bother. But in this, if you want to make somebody happy, like this guy here, Beethan, he's not landed, so his opinion is irrelevant. But if he was landed, oh look, -3, yay. Now he's +2, so it's a +5 opinion boost to be put in front of troops. So there's that. Another thing you do to make people happy is give them a spot on the council. As you can see here by this little chair symbol here, there is an open council position, so I have room for an advisor. So I could give, the council position to somebody, but I can't give it to this guy here because he's already on the council. He's my spy master. You can't have two council positions. But if he did need a spot on the council, he wasn't already, we could give him that. That would give him some opinion. As you see here by this little fist, that means he's a powerful vassal, and he expects to be on the council. And if he's not, he'll have like a I think it's -40 opinion for not being on the council. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and that'll be designated by this fist being bright red. The bright red fist means he's powerful and he's not on the council and he's pissed off about it. And you'll see it in his opinion modifiers if you hover over here. But putting somebody on the council makes them like you quite a bit. So let's, just for the sake of it, Sweeney, let's make Sweeney the -8 guy put on our council, and let's see what he does to him. Sweeney. Now he likes us by 2, so there you go. Gives him a little bit of bonus. It didn't give him a huge bonus because he didn't really care. He's not a powerful vassal. He doesn't really care about being on the council, but we put him on there anyway. He's like, okay, well, whatever. But anyhow, so that's how that works. In addition to all these specific actions you can take, certain traits and stats you'll have will also affect people's opinion of you. So for example, having a really high prestige, which at the moment we do not, as you can see, we just started the game, we only have 40, but your feudal noble vassals here will love you for having high prestige. So that's something to bear in mind. Get that prestige real high, and that'll give you an opinion bonus with these noble vassals here. If you're trying to impress clergy vassals like this guy here, like religious bishopric guys like this guy here, having a high piety will impress those guys. So there's a lot of events that happen in the game that will give you high piety. Take them if you want. Sometimes you can acquire artifacts which will give you piety and prestige for that matter. If you keep your piety nice and high, it'll impress these guys. So it's just something else you can kind of take into consideration. Also certain traits such as gregarious. If you happen to have the gregarious trait, that's a great one for making people like you. It just means you're a really sociable person, and so on. In your focus, you can take a trait called carousing, which means you just go out and hang out with people and stuff. That'll make people like you. Having a high diplomacy will make people like you in general. There's certain things you can do sometimes. You can hold tournaments. You can do all kinds of little things, hold feasts, summer fairs, things like that. That will help people like you a lot, and it's really, really handy when your realm is kind of rough, and you look at all your vassals and they're all like red because none of them like you and so on. So it's just things like that you can kind of stack and combine to really, really help out your realm, and that's going to be really important upon succession. So once this guy takes over, Prince Duncan of Scotland, when this character dies here, when Malcolm dies, Duncan's going to take over, and people are not going to like it. People like succession is the bitch in CK2, and people are going to hate this kid taking over, and so you're going to have to do everything you can to get people to like you as quickly as possible to keep the realm stable and together. Now, one thing that gets asked quite a bit is how and why do you adopt feudalism when you're tribal? Now, the reason, first of all, you'd want to do this is because it gives you access to better succession laws. It helps you get off Gavelkind, which is what you want generally in a larger realm, or your realm will tear itself to pieces if you're not careful. Also, you get all kinds of tax income, which is really nice. And generally, the tribals tend to struggle in the later game against the feudals because the feudals have heavy infantry and all kinds of technology and stuff like that you're just not going to get as tribal. So, as fun as tribal is in the beginning of the game, and as good as it is, you might be used to your massive tribal armies running around, and it's easy to get lots of troops and stuff like that. You definitely want to go feudal eventually. The transition is a bit rough, but at the end of the day, you're going to want to be, feudal relatively as quick as you can, pretty much, or you're just going to get crushed later on, probably, unless you're some super baller player who can take tribal super far, and I'm sure people have done it, but for the most part, you want to go feudal if you can. So how do you do that? Well, first you go up here into your intrigue area, and you'll have a little option here, adopt feudalism. If you hover over the little conditions here, the question mark, it'll tell you what you need to satisfy in order to actually do this. So first of all, you have to be at peace, which we are. Is not an unreformed pagan. So that means you have to reform the faith. We'll talk about that in a second. Primary title has the law absolute tribal organization. So basically you go to your laws, and you see here in the realm tab you have tribal organization. Right now we're at minimum. You want to get to maximum. Now, as you can see by the tooltips, your unreformed vassals, which will be all of them before you reform, they won't like this law. They're going to hate you for this, but it's a necessary evil. So if you want to go to feudalism, and spoiler alert, you do, you want to get as high as you can on this. Well, actually, you got to max it out. So there's that. Also, capital holding, one of the following must be true. Either your holding type is a castle, or you have a stone hill fort. So you need to build a stone hill fort in your capital province. So if we go here, we see we have level 2. We have a wooden hill fort. So you just got to keep upgrading this until you get to a stone hill fort. Now, once all these conditions are satisfied, you will get the option to adopt feudalism. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that once you adopt feudalism, that doesn't mean that your tribal vassals will also. So you see here we have these tribal guys. We go feudal. They're not necessarily going to go feudal instantly themselves unless they have a stone hill fort as well. So you're going to have to wait for them to catch up, or you can just build them a stone hill fort in their capital, and then they should adopt feudalism with you. Now, if you recall, one of the requirements to adopt feudalism was to reform the faith. So how do we do that? What does that even mean? Well, up here you see all these little buttons here. One of them is religion. So if you click on that, It's going to take you to the Religion tab. And this is basically what's going on in your religion. Right now we have a moral authority of 30, which isn't the greatest. Here's where all of our holy sites are and who holds them. Holy sites are just, well, as the name implies, they are sites that your religion considers holy and sacred. Generally speaking, you want to hold these. And there's a little button up here that says Reform the Faith. And here's all the conditions you need to satisfy in order to reform the faith. So first of all, you need a moral authority of 50. You can gain moral authority by, raiding temples of infidels, by fighting infidels and holy wars and things like that. So that'll drive up your moral authority. You control at least 3 of the holy sites. So we only control 1. We need to control at least 3. So where do you find those? So on the map modes here, there's a religious map mode. If you zoom out, you can see all the different religions, Catholic here, and Sunni, and Shia, and Tengri, and all these things. We're actually Slavics, that's up here. That's where we are. Or, sorry, Remuva, my bad. And as you can see, there's certain provinces that are white. These white provinces are the holy sites. So actually, looking at this, the Remuva faith would be relatively easy to reform, because if you start here, in where we started, that's actually pretty darn close, so that wouldn't be too hard. So these white provinces here are the holy sites, so you want to hold at least 3 of those. You also need 750 piety. As you can see here, we only have 15, but with certain tech, like Majesty down here, you can get monthly piety. Also, like I said before, through holy wars and raiding, occasionally raiding infidels, fighting infidels, you'll also gain piety. Also through events, things like that. So your piety will go up over time. So it's not too concerning, but it's something just kind of keep in mind if you're trying to reform the faith. So the last topic I'd like to cover in this video is combat. We briefly mentioned it in our previous video, the tips and tricks one, but we didn't really dive too deep. And combat is an interesting beast in Crusader Kings 2. It's a lot of sort of complexity under the hood of a fairly simple to execute system. So it's like I said, it's complicated, but at the same time it's not. So we'll go a little bit deeper into combat in this video and show you what it's all about. So first of all, let's look at the army interface here. Now I've gone ahead and raised an army just for the purposes of demonstration here, and I've gone ahead and declared war on Norway, just to make their troops that were in the area anyways hostile to me, so that we could start a fight and show you these mechanics. But basically, you'll see here, this is the army screen. Here's my raised army. These are my personal levies as well as my domain levy. So basically, this is all the list of all the different troops that are in my army. And you can see they're broken down into different troop types. Furthermore, this whole group of people, this army here is broken into 3 flanks. We have the left, the center, and the right flank. Now, if you look here, you'll see the troop breakdown of each flank. And you can see how many guys are in each flank here, and these are all the sort of breakdowns. Now, what do all these symbols mean? Well, they're different types of troops. So we have light infantry. Now, when you're playing tribal, this is going to make up the bulk of your army. And when you hover over this little thing, you can see the different stats of the unit. Now, the first thing we should mention here is that there's 3 phases of combat. So you see here values and phases: skirmish, melee, pursue. In CK2, combat has 3 phases, and we'll show you that in just a second here. I might actually have to detach some of these guys. That might be too overwhelming a fight if we go to fight these guys. Maybe I'll cut them in half, but we'll see. So, as you see here, we have attack values, defense values, current morale, and max morale. Now, these attack and defense values are for each of the phases. So it works like this. When a fight first starts, you're in the skirmish phase. That's when, archers are shooting at each other and that sort of thing. Once that phase ends, you move into the melee phase. That's where the troops actually run together and clash and start fighting. Think of that scene in Braveheart, where they're fighting the English army, and it's versus the archers. That would have been the skirmish phase, right? And they come together, and then that's the melee phase where they're actually fighting. And then you have the pursue phase. That's when the battle is basically decided. It's already won. At that point, that's when the cavalry is running down the people that are trying to run away. Again, kind of like that Braveheart scene, right? So that's a good way to sort of visualize it anyway. So we have light infantry. Speaking of Braveheart, the Scottish army, I would call that light infantry. They're poorly armed, poorly equipped, just a bunch of clowns with sticks and pitchforks and things. That's your light infantry. That's what you're going to get mostly when you're playing tribal. And as you see here, based on their values and stuff like that, they're not so great. You know, 0.01, 0.01, 0.02. Their stats aren't super great. They've got some morale in there, but on the whole, they're not the greatest troops. Moving on, we have pikemen, which are an extremely defensive unit, as you can see here. So they have no attack value in the skirmish phase. They have some attack value in the melee phase, pretty good actually, and nothing in the pursuit phase. But as you see here, they have massive defensive values, or if you compare them to the light infantry's defensive values. And you'll note, just as an interesting side note here, you'll notice defensive values across the board are quite a bit higher than attack values. So that means that, generally speaking, an attacking army does have a disadvantage in this game, and that, of course, is compounded by, you know, rivers and terrain and things like that. But as you see here, the pikemen have wildly higher defense values than they do attack values. And as you can see here, they also have quite a bit of morale. They have 0.23 morale right now, because as you see here, my army was just raised and it's missing a bit of its morale. That's what that red signifies here. But you kind of see how the defense values are super crazy high. Well, these are pikemen, right? They just can't stand there with their pikes out and let the horses or let the troops run into them. Again, as you saw in that scene in Braveheart. So that's kind of what pikemen are for. They provide a lot of morale to your army, and they provide a lot of defense. So they're the staying power of your army when they're being attacked. Now, most of the time, you don't have a tremendous amount of control with the types of units that are going to be put into your army, with the exception of retinues, which we'll mention in a little bit. Then we have archers, and as you can see here by the values, their expertise is in the skirmish and to some degree the pursue phase as well. So they're good in the first section of the fight. So if you want to drop the enemy morale real quick, you can use a lot of archers. Archers are also good for assaulting holdings. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later on, but basically when you're sieging down a fort, there's an option to assault the holding, which basically means just bum rush it, run in and take it. And archers are quite good in that stage, because that stage uses the skirmish values of the troops. So as you see here, pikemen would suck at bum rushing the thing, and light infantry wouldn't be so good. So yeah, archers great at the skirmish phase, and to some degree to the pursuit phase, but not so much at the melee phase. And then we have heavy infantry. These are, I guess you could call the British soldiers in that Braveheart scene. They're heavily armored, heavily armed, and as you can see, they have much higher values here. They suck in the skirmish phase, but they are beasts in the melee phase, 0.06, as opposed to 0.01. They're literally 6 times stronger as far as attack is concerned in that phase. And even in defense, they have considerably higher stats, as you can see. But if you look here, they have very low morale. Well, they have no morale, really. So you need to supplement heavy infantry with other troops that have higher morale, such as, well, you know, pikemen and light infantry, if you want to keep a little bit of staying power in your army. Otherwise, they'll just shatter. But on the attack, as you can see here, they're quite powerful. And then we have cavalry. As you can see here, 0.02, 0.03, and 0.06. They're very strong on the attack, particularly in pursuit phase. They run people down like crazy. Again, very poor morale. Then you have heavy cavalry, which sadly we don't have any right now, so I can't demonstrate the stats, but they're very good too. So, and you can kind of look at the different stats of the different units as you find them. But basically, that's more or less the roles of the different troop types. Next, moving on down to this interface down at the bottom here, we have, like I said before, the 3 flanks. So here's again the breakdown of the troops in each flank. And here at the top here, we have 3 characters. These are the generals in charge of each flank. So in the middle, we have Sweeney, and he has a personal combat skill of, oh wait, nothing, because he sucks. So he has a martial skill of 9, and if you hover over his martial skill, you can see his specific bonuses that he's providing to this army. So he has a defense bonus because he's patient, as you see here. And that is multiplied by his martial influence to give him a total defense bonus of 29%, which is alright. This particular guy here is cruel, and so he has a morale damage modifier because he's cruel, which is multiplied by his martial to give him a total morale damage of 15.5. This guy here has morale defense because he is brave, and it's multiplied by, again, by his martial. Now, generally speaking, you want higher martial score in combat, obviously. I think the general wisdom is 8, So you want to put anybody with a marshal of 8 or more, feel free to put in front of an army. Obviously, the higher the better. Now they're also going to get certain traits, like I was saying before. Like this guy is cruel, so you see here, cruel morale damage plus 10%. Look for traits like that when you're picking generals. Sorry, my bad. He has a personal combat skill of 1. I guess it doesn't say in the other thing. That's for like things like duels, or occasionally in combat he'll get cornered and have to fight for himself. That's when this stat will come into play. So there's a whole bunch of other, combat modifiers. Like obviously there's cruel, then these misguided warrior, that can go all the way up. This is his education focus. That just rolled poorly, unfortunately. That could have been like brilliant strategist, which would have meant his stats are much higher. Or, there's all these different stats like brave or brawny or strong. These will affect combat. And you can get some generals with a ton of modifiers, and they make great leaders in front of armies. Marshal also has an overall damage bonus, albeit slight, to your flank. So you generally want to put high martial people in front of your troops. Now, generally, you'd want to put your best general in front of the main flank, the center flank, because the center has to hold, right? So you want to put generally your best guy here. Now, there are specific traits for people leading the center, and there are specific traits for people leading flanks. So if you happen to have a guy who's really good at flanking, well, you might want to put him at a flank, and so on. There's also traits for things like terrain expertise. So one guy might be really good in hills. There's things for sieging, so you might have a siege expert, which is really handy, and so on. Generals, like in EU4, if you're familiar with that game, are very important in combat. They can literally turn the tide. So make sure you find great generals in the unit finder, or the person finder, or whatever it's called, the character finder. Sorry. Make sure you find lots of great generals in there. Invite them to court, and take the time. Or you can even educate your children to become good generals, and have them educated by somebody who's got high martial and good battle traits that you want to pass on and such. And you should have lots of great generals. It's kind of a side note here if you want to help that along. Here in your positions for your council or whatever, your marshal, he can do this. I believe it. Yeah, organize the army. If you have him doing that, he's going to train your generals, and they will get better and better and better over time. And you can produce some pretty badass generals by using that. So just a little side note there. Now, we discussed phases of combat before. Let's go ahead and demonstrate that real fast. So I'm going to actually split this army in half. I don't want it to be over too quickly. So we're going to send this stack over here, even that 800 stack. Let's break off a few more here. Get them over here. And let's get everybody going here. And then have this stack come back and fight. Okay, so we're going to put some dudes in front of here. Looks like we can't move Sweeney. Looks like he's stuck there. Malcolm, yeah, whatever. Well, we can't move him, unfortunately. That's too bad. Well, that's okay. Oh, there is no flank. That's why. Okay. We have no center flank. Now, you can reorganize your unit any way you like by clicking this little reorganize unit arrow here. And using this, you can break down the flanks in any way you like. And in this case, we might want to consolidate into a center flank. Or we could balance it like that. Yeah, let's just balance it like that just for the sake of demonstration. Now, we're going to put a better guy. We'll put ourselves, us the king. We're going to lead the center because we have a better martial score here. Let's put Simon back on the left flank, and we will put Mungo on that flank. As you see here, he's got skilled technician, which is going to drive up his martial skill, help his personal combat skill. Plus he's brave, so this guy is really good in personal combat, so that should be interesting, should he get into that scenario. So we have our 3 flanks. We're going to fight this guy here, this stack of 208. We're probably going to win. Well, see, we have low morale. Let's wait for our morale to recover here. We go fighting that guy. Chase him a little bit here. Okay, change of plans. We were chasing that Norwegian army, but unfortunately they've met up with some of their friends, and now they've got 3,200 guys there, so we're going to get a little bit face rolled here, but that's okay. It's just a demonstration. So let's go ahead and attack these guys, and we'll have a look at the different battle phases. I'm going to slow down the game a little bit so we don't blow through it here. Okay. So here we are in battle. As you can see, we're busy fighting. We're currently in the skirmish phase, which is denoted by this by the bow and arrow here. And you'll watch, as we go along, it's going to slowly change from phase to phase. Now, another thing to pay attention to is tactics. Each general has a possibility of using a particular tactic, like a battle strategy against the opposing general. And depending on martial scores, they might return the favor and use a different tactic and to counteract it or whatever. And the higher your martial is, the more likely you are to use these good tactics and such. So it's something to pay attention to. You'll see such and such tactics get kind of shown here. So you can see here the phase ticking away. We're all both losing soldiers and such here. Now, another thing, I'll just pause it real quick to show you this. Now, if you hover over here, you can see right now we're doing damage here. Liege Levy of Earl Kenneth of Buchan has 2 damage and 2 morale damage. That little red fist, that means morale damage. So not only are we beating up each other's bodies and hurting each other, we're also damaging each other's morale. And we only have so much morale. And you can see here the morale of each flank. So green is good and red is depleted. And once the red gets all the way to here, once the green is depleted on any given flank, that flank will break and run. And what's going to happen at that point is that the opposing flanks can ignore it and then focus on whatever flanks are not running, and it just kind of becomes a spiraling effect. So let's watch this fight a little more here. So you can see this phase is ticking to an end here. Boom. Now we're in the melee phase, and if you saw there, charge tactic, all these different tactics being used. Again, that's the generals kicking in and using their tactics. This flank is broken, unfortunately. So as you can see here, he's bugging out. These are the generals in charge, and you can see here their martial scores here. So it gets you an idea of who's in the battle. And as you can see here, we are breaking. Just under sheer weight of numbers. And now it's the pursue phase, as you see here, by the horse. So right now the battle is lost, and we're just running for our lives, and they're chasing us down on horses, basically getting free kills. That's what's going on right now. Pursue tactic. Oh! There you go. How about that? Our king died in battle right at the end. So he was literally running for his life, and he was run down by a horse, by a Norwegian horse in England somewhere. Poor guy. And that's succession, but that's not the topic of this this little section here. But that's basically how combat works, guys. It's an interesting beast. You can toy around with it all you like. You can, like I said before, you can toy with these flanks and micromanage. And but that's how that goes. So it's complicated and then simple at the same time. Like we said before, the rule of thumb: have more guys. That's true about 70% of the time. If they have a different troop composition, like if you're coming at a feudal army with lots of heavy infantry, and you're a tribal army mostly light infantry, well, your numbers are a little bit deceiving there. Again, if he has a lot of cavalry, that might be a bit deceiving. So just kind of keep those things in mind. Also, terrain will have a huge effect. Stepping across a river will have a penalty, all these other things. But all in all, it's not too bad. Now, one last thing I did want to mention while on the topic of combat and war is retinues. A retinue is like a standing army of the king or the emperor that's kind of always around and always with him. Now, as you know, you can't declare war in another country when you have raised army levies and all that, but when it comes to retinues, you can. You're allowed to have a retinue active when you declare war. You can always have your retinue out and about, and it's a great opportunity to supplement your army. It's also a really great way to have a very specialized force if that's what you want. So retinues are found in the military area here under the retinues tab. So you have your levies, your fleet levies, and then your retinues. So as you see here, I've loaded just up as the Holy Roman Emperor right now just to demonstrate this, because the higher your title, the more retinue cap you have. It also comes from the amount of land you have and holdings and things and technology and such. But anyhow, so we loaded him up, and here's all the different retinues that this guy can make. Now, as you see here, we have a heavy infantry retinue, which will come with 200 heavy and 50 archers, or you can get pikemen if you want. That also come with 50 archers. You can get 50 heavy cavalry and 200 light. You can get, a heavy cavalry. It's got 150 heavy and 100 light, and you can, there's all these different combinations of things, and you can buy them here. So as you see here, like for example, this heavy infantry retinue would cost me 98 gold. So let's recruit that. Boom. So when you recruit that, you get deducted your gold, and then you start with one guy, and he will slowly over time, dependent on this setting here, he will generate slowly. He will recruit into this total number here. So these here are the 3 settings. This is the reinforcement rate of your retinues. So the higher you have this set, the more quickly it will generate into its full potential. But of course, it costs you more money. If we speed up the game here, you can see over time, every month, he's going to grab a few more troops. It does take a little while, but we don't have all that much money. Well, yet. We're making some good coin here. So what we could do is we could hire another retinue. So let's get some cavalry. Oh, we can't afford it. Okay, whatever. We'll get some no, we can't afford that. Let's get some pikemen. There we go. So now we're going to add that other retinue to our list here. And now those are 2 retinues combined, so they're going to gain more per month. Every month they'll gain, see, 29. And that'll slowly work up and work up and work up. And this is just a standing army I can always have up. It doesn't piss anybody off to have it raised because it's mine personally. It's very, very low in maintenance. Very low in maintenance. The most of the cost that comes with this retinue is raising it in the first place and reinforcing it. But just to have it standing around doesn't cost you hardly anything. So you're good there. So you can, over time, you can gradually build these retinues and build them and build them and build them. But one thing you have to keep in mind, is when you hover over here, you'll see retinue cap usage. So as you see here, this heavy retinue guy here, he costs 700. Okay, 700 retinue cap. So if you look down here, this is your retinue cap here, used and total. So as the emperor, with the amount of land and technology we have a retinue cap of 7.5k. And this guy takes up 700, so a little bit of quick math there, and you can kind of figure out how many retinues you can create and how much you can have. And of course, as the game goes on, that number will go up with tech and such, and you can have more and more and more. So you'll find with a lower ruler, you'll have a much smaller retinue cap and all this. But that's basically retinues, and they can, like I said before, they can supplement your army. They can have, like let's say you want to have a full pikeman retinue. You can park them behind a major river in some hills like this right here in Ulm, right? So he's on hills behind a major river with lots of pikemen, so an army trying to cross that's going to have a really hard time breaking it. So just little things like that you can consider, or maybe you want a retinue full of archers. Like we talked about before, archers have a really good skirmish value, well, relatively good anyway, and they're cheap and they're good at assaulting holdings. So maybe you want to have an archer retinue for sieging. Like say in war you want to siege down holdings really fast. You can use an archer retinue to just burn them down, just boom, 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 siege them super fast, and that's a pretty helpful thing to do. And just things like that you can kind of consider. And one thing that's worth noting is different cultures throughout the game will occasionally have special retinue units. So if you're playing in India, and I don't think I can really demonstrate this here, but if you're playing in the Indian area, for example, they have access to war elephants as part of the retinue, and I've played with them before, and it's just fun having elephants in your army. Like, how cool is that, right? And there's a whole bunch of other different cultural units to have in there. So it's kind of a fun little mechanic to play with, and it helps you supplement your army and keep yourself on top of things. Now, another thing to consider is rebellions and factions. So when you have factions, when they're considering whether or not to attack you, since there's 16.2% of leads, that's how many troops, or that's how many supporters they have in their faction. So if they were to rise up, they would have a strength of 16% of our power, which would be a really stupid thing to rebel with because they would lose. But the more support they get, the more men, the more guys they're going to have, this number is going to go up. And when that starts hit around 100, they're going to have an army just as strong as ours, so they can challenge us in a war to meet their demands or whatever. But if we have a retinue, a really strong retinue, that's going to act against them. It's going to sort of tip the scales, and they'll be slightly less likely to want to attack us in the first place. So it's a really great idea to have a nice, strong retinue. Well, that's all I really wanted to talk about in this video. It's gone on a little bit longer than I expected. There are still plenty of things that I could talk about this game, so we might do another video in this little series. But for now, I think that's going to be it. We've gone on long enough, I think. But guys, I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, give it that like at the bottom. If you didn't, well, there's a button for that too. Either way, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.